Hello, good morning, and you're welcome to this morning's Signpost webinar. My name is Mark Gibson, and I'm the manager of the Teagasc Connected Programme. I hope you're keeping safe and well and getting to enjoy the fine, well, dry weather at least today. The Signpost webinar series is brought to you in association with the National Rural Network, Food Drink Ireland and Dairy Sustainability Ireland. And today we're going to be looking at farm sustainability from a milk processor's perspective. And I'm delighted to be joined by the Director of Sustainability for the Carbery Group, Enda Buckley, and Farm Sustainability Manager with Carbery Ireland, Aoife Feeney. Good morning, Enda and Aoife.
Morning, Mark.
We're also joined this morning by Pat Murphy, who's head of the Environment Knowledge Transfer Programme in Teagasc. Good morning, Pat.
Morning.
Aoife and Enda, you're very welcome to the series, and you're going to be giving us a presentation about the work that's going on in Carbery in relation to sustainability. But maybe, Enda, you could tell us a little bit about the work that you do in Carbery.
Yeah, so I suppose, look, as head of sustainability, Mark, it's quite varied, and especially given I suppose the Carbery Group makeup. I suppose we have the dairy and nutritional business in Ireland, and then we have the flavors and taste business globally. So it's quite varied. Very fortunate to have a very good team. People like Aoife and Orla in Ireland, and Gavin and Caroline, etc. in the US and the UK. So it's a mixed bag. And I suppose, you know, there's something different every hour, to be honest. The farm piece obviously is critical to us. But, you know, it's just so varied. And, you know, if you look at the various, I suppose, elements that make up sustainability, you've got the environment piece. That in itself is a huge bank of work. But then you've got the whole social governance and people piece as well. So it's very varied, which makes for, I suppose, you know, I suppose it's a very interesting job, to be fair, Mark, and with plenty of challenges and plenty of opportunities as well, I would say.
A busy role by the sounds of it. And Aoife, if I could go to you, you're a Longford woman based in Cork, and tell us what about the work that you're doing with Carbery. I know you're working closely with the Teagasc ASAP program as well.
Yeah, so I started with Carbery almost 3 years ago, and I suppose my role was focused on ASAP at the very start. So working with suppliers to improve water quality, and I suppose over the last couple of years I've kind of evolved, and I'm working with farmer suppliers in terms of our Greener Dairy Programme, Animal Health Ireland, and I work closely with 4 West Cork co-ops as well and their technical teams. So really, I suppose I'm the person on the ground for getting out on farm and doing farm assessments. And I suppose implementing any innovations or changes we can at farm level and supporting our suppliers on a sustainable journey.
Great. Well, thank you for that introduction. That gives us a good sense of the perspective and that you're coming from. So you're going to do a joint presentation for us today, and I think Enda, you're going to kick off the presentation, and then Aoife, you're going to pick up along the way. So I think without further ado, we get stuck into the presentation. And just to remind people while you're getting set up there that if you do have a question or comment that you'd like to make, please do send your comments through the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. We'll be delighted to put those questions to both Aoife and Enda during the after the presentation. So that's great.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Aoife. Thanks, guys. So yeah, next slide there. So please, Aoife. So yeah, just the ownership, and I'm sure most people are familiar with Carbery and our location, I suppose, but just to give people a feel for it. So look, first of all, we're owned by the 4 West Cork co-ops. So Bandonberry Road, Drina Savard. Like in terms of the catchment, if you were to take a straight line kind of from Castleton there across the Kinsale, and everything south of that basically is Carbery. So we currently have 1,207 suppliers. Milk is primarily sourced from grass, as is the case with, I think, all Irish dairy. And I suppose something unique as well to Carbery is, you know, we're quite centric. 99% of the farmers are within a 40-mile radius of the Ballineen plant. So it's a very kind of central model. Next slide. Yeah. So group locations. So I touched on it earlier, I suppose. Look, we have a global footprint at this stage. That's really down to the acquisition and movement into the flavors business. So our flavors business is called Synergy, and they have locations, as you can see there, in the US. So it's called Wakanda is the main HQ in the US, just outside Chicago. So we're in the US, Brazil, then we're in the UK in High Wycombe, Trieste in Italy, and Bangkok would be our manufacturing facilities for Synergy. The HQ is, of course, Ballineen in West Cork. So that's our dairy nutrition business. And we also have a joint venture with Barbers in the UK, just outside Bristol. The green dots there are the international representatives we have through the likes of Borbia, Ornua, etc. So next slide, please. Yeah, so look, I was asked to kind of give a small bit of a origin, maybe in history of sustainability at Carbery. So it goes way back, to be fair. And I would say it's innate within cooperatives, to be fair. I think that kind of social kind of engagement and interaction you see with co-ops, really helps sustainability flourish. Certainly, and I'm with Carbery now going on 6 years, there's a real do the right thing culture, I would say. And I'd also make the point that, sustainability, there's a lot of kind of very fancy language used and very, fancy terms. But ultimately, for me, it boils down to doing the right thing. And that's certainly very present in Carbery, and I would probably say in co-ops throughout Ireland as well. I think, and this is a personal viewpoint, I think the geography has helped. As I've Carbery, because you saw from that earlier graphic, we're actually quite small, even in Irish terms. We've a small enough catchment, but what that has done is it's really encouraged innovation. And I've used these terms here. I think added value is something that comes up in conversations an awful lot in Carbery. We have to bring added value because of our size for our shareholders. And then future-proofing, always looking ahead. How can we protect and bring more value back to our shareholders? That's a real motivation for the way Carbery operates. And look, that's driven innovation. So just a few examples here. Carbery process. So going way back to 1978, this was, ingenious in ways. So the Carbery process basically is the ability to generate bioethanol from milk. So that all started in Carbery. And I've got a slide later that gets into greater detail on that. It's one of the first processors in the world to install ultrafiltration to produce whey protein concentrates. Again, that's going way back to the 70s. Dubliner cheese, again, is a unique product. And it's, it's not cheddar, I suppose, but look, it's a fantastic cheese, and it's been a phenomenal success for Carbery. So that's, again, innovation in action, I suppose. And the move into the flavor space in the 90s, again, that's delivered phenomenal value, and it's a great part of the company. And that's a great success, I suppose, as well for the company. So again, that was innovative. So next slide, please. Yeah, and look, our goal when it comes to sustainability is it's quite a simple one. We want to be recognized as a world-class sustainable business leader. That's our sustainability goal. Next slide, please, Aoife. Yeah, so look, that's the goal, I suppose, and the ambition, I suppose, when we look at it is, so we've now got a dedicated sustainability team. In the last 6 months, we've developed green teams across our sites. So these are people on the ground that are really, I suppose, helping us to, drive and really push that sustainability agenda across the group. We have a steering committee with our leadership team that was established for the group as well. It's now a core element of our group strategy. We have a standalone sustainability strategy. And again, our CEO and our leadership team really buy into that. We had our inaugural CSR report in 2018. We're currently finalizing our third report, and it's now integrated into the annual report, such as the importance we put on sustainability. We're developing a zero carbon roadmap and science-based targets for the group. That's a big project for us this year. Back in 2018, we started to procure 100% renewable electricity for the site in Ballineen. And I suppose, look, we've a few slides later as well on Farm Zero C. We're developing a climate neutral dairy farm at the Chinook farm. Next slide, please. So we kind of divide sustainability into 4 kind of main areas. So the first one is environment, and real focus on carbon, water, waste, and there's still a massive focus on that. But I suppose going forward, we're putting more focus on renewable energy. Biodiversity is very important to us, and the bioeconomy, where members are big, and we see that as a very important space. Marketplace quality, that's a given in our sector, that's critical. Nutrition, responsible sourcing, we're seeing more and more requests on this front. Sustainable procurement is very important to us. And I suppose, look, something we would say over the last 25, 30 years, Carbery's paid a leading Irish milk price. And again, that's bringing value back to our farmer suppliers. Workplace, developing employees, early career development, health and safety. I think a good example in the workplace actually in Carbery is we had, you see lots of examples of guys that have started on the floor and they've, gone up the ladder to management positions. We had a case that we had a gentleman last week who celebrated 48 years working in Carbery. So I think that tells a story. And I suppose on the community front, community development, something that's again really innate in Carbery, goes right back to its origins. Collaboration actually is a key word for Carbery. Again, given I suppose where we're based, we have to collaborate, and that's a key element of how we function. Collaboration with schools, academics, institutions. That's very important to us. Supporting local charities, again, strong heritage in that, and health and safety initiatives with farmers is something we're starting to work on as well. So next slide, please, Aoife. Yeah, and look, we're proud members, I guess, of Dairy Industry Ireland, and working closely with the other dairy processors. And I suppose this graphic here kind of shows again a unique collaboration. I know this has been mentioned before in the Signpost series, but I think it's important to emphasize it. So, DII were instrumental in developing Dairy Sustainability Ireland. And look, this is very unique to our sector, and I certainly haven't come across anything like this anywhere. And I suppose you've got the processors, you've got the trade associations and the farm orgs, the likes of ICOS, IFA, are in there. And then you've got the governing bodies. So the EPA, BORBIA, Department of Agriculture, Department of Environment. So it's unique collaboration, I suppose, and it was instrumental really in developing ASSUP. And I suppose at this juncture, I'm going to hand over to Aoife, who's going to talk about ASSUP and I suppose some of the work we're doing at farm level in Carbery. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Aoife.
Thanks, Enda. So yeah, I suppose looking at sustainable farm development and what we try to do at farm level, really the 4 West Cork co-ops are central to this, and to Carbery and myself really being able to get out at farm level. And as Enda mentioned, collaboration is really a key aspect. So the graph on the left, I suppose, really just showcases the variety of, I suppose, industry partners that we work with in order to try and continue our sustainable farm development. So, the 4 West Cork co-ops are central. We work with AHI, the Department of Agriculture, our local communities, Teagasc, local research institutions and universities and colleges, and BORBIA, just to name a few. So, we're really, I suppose, the collaboration piece is really, really important to us. So just looking then at ASSUP, so we're, I suppose, a key supporting member of the ASSUP programme. So that's the Agricultural Sustainability Support and Advisory Programme. So this was founded in 2018. And I suppose the key aim of this is to improve water quality across the country. So I know it's been covered on the Signpost series previously, so I'm just going to touch on it very briefly in case someone hasn't heard of it. So it's a collaborative approach, I suppose, by the industry to improve water quality at farm level. And there's 30 advisors across the country. There's 20 with Teagasc and 10 with the co-op. So I'm one of those 10 advisors. And my colleague Lane Giles in West Cork also works for Teagasc with farmers in the region as well. So I suppose what we really focus on at farm level is nutrient management, land management, farmyard and infrastructure management, and where applicable, riverbank management. Really, we're supporting farmers in terms of growth and profitability, improving their green credentials, and encouraging community harmony where possible as well. So we work really closely with the local authorities waters programme and Teagasc as well, as I said, and the EPA too. So the whole aim really is to break the pathway from pollution source to the effective water course. So in terms of how that's working across the country, so there's 190 areas for action that have been selected, and these areas are being worked on between 2018 and the end of this year, 2021. And I suppose within those 190 areas, we have 5 key areas in the Carbery region. So we're spanning really from Skull across to Kinsale in those areas. So we're working in those areas with our farmer suppliers, and I suppose the key issues we're trying to mitigate against are nitrogen and phosphate pollution and sedimentation in some cases as well. So what we do, I suppose, to encourage farmer engagement, which has been very positive to date, across the country, public meetings are held in conjunction with LawPro and in conjunction with Teagasc as well. And then after that, we'd hold a streamside meeting for the farmers involved in areas for action. And in the Carbery region, I suppose the few that we've had have proven quite good. We had great attendance at them. This year, given the circumstances with COVID, obviously we couldn't host them in person. So we actually held our first one online a number of weeks back. And we had really good attendance and really good feedback from that. So we were quite delighted with that, because it can be, I suppose there's a little bit of Zoom fatigue sometimes out there in the farming community. So it was great to see the attendance at that. What we found really beneficial as well is sending letters just before we plan to go out to farms. So what we've done is we've sent letters through the 4 West Cork co-ops to the relevant areas for action to the farmers. And really that letter just outlines what the programme is about, what the main issues are in their area, and what they can do to get involved. And that really has been a really positive way of getting good engagement at farm level. We followed that up with a phone call then, and then the farm assessment is carried out as well. So we've had really good engagement in our areas for action to date. We've also spoken at a number of discussion groups across West Cork in conjunction with Teagasc as well, and they've proved really positive. And I suppose from those discussion groups, there's farmers outside of areas for action who are really keen to get involved. And really this is showcasing, I suppose, that, you know, farmers do want to do the right thing, and they're willing to avail of whatever services are available to help them on that path to sustainable production and improving water quality. So it's really positive to see that happening on the ground as well. So I suppose in 2012, Carbery launched the Carbery Greener Dairy Farms Programme. So this is an innovative dairy efficiency programme, and it was designed, I suppose, to optimise resources at farm level and improve best practice as well. So it was the first of its kind to be developed in Ireland, and the key focus of this programme was on carbon footprint, water footprint and energy footprint. So I suppose over the course of the programme, in 2012, I suppose was kind of the base year, was a benchmarking year, so measurements were taken across initially 12 farms. And really this looked at soil samples, energy and water audits, so there was actually meters installed in all of the farms to monitor both energy and water. Monthly inputs were measured through, I suppose, quite a comprehensive survey, and e-profit monitors were completed by the farmers, as well as carbon footprinting, and biodiversity mapping was carried out in these farms also throughout the course of the programme. And then Teagasc were quite involved with this as well, so there was expert advice provided through them and through other industry partners, and I suppose farm walks and various discussion group meetings were carried out as well, and then dissemination occurred through, I suppose, those events as well. So throughout the course of the programme from 2013 to 2017, carbon emissions were reduced by 15%, which was fantastic to see. And I suppose there was huge awareness raised among all of the farmers on water use, energy use. They increased the profitability, and I suppose this occurred really from managing their inputs better and managing their resources better. So, you know, some farms were reducing their energy use, some were reducing their water use, and in turn that returned a better profit for them at farm level, which is fantastic. EBI amongst the farmers increased 20% as a group, which is fantastic. And I suppose the key thing, as I said, was the education on the importance of sustainability. And the numbers involved in this programme grew from 12 initially to 28, which was fantastic. So I suppose going forward then in 2018, we had a further 36 farmers join the programme as phase 2. So they're focusing on improving soil nutrients and improving grass use as well. And I suppose the emphasis with the group going forward is very much on animal welfare, farm safety, biodiversity, grassland and soil management. So I suppose a lot of it is sticking to the basics, but they're quite key, I suppose, for sustainable development at farm level as well. And as part of this programme, and Enda was heavily involved in this, in 2017, there was Digital Stories launched in conjunction with the EPA. and Macroom as well. So some of the farmers involved in the phase 1 of the Carbery Greener Dairy Farm Programme produced digital stories telling their own story of sustainable farming, and they can be viewed on the link on the slide there, carbery.com/digital storytelling. So they're quite short videos, but they tell a really nice story, and they're completely produced by the farmers themselves. There was no input from Carbery. The only thing really was we gave them access to software to be able to edit their videos. But they're a really good way of, I suppose, seeing it from and hearing it from the farmer's point of view, which is excellent. And I suppose coming on from that then, through UCC, there was a retrospective prior learning mechanism developed, and this recognised that the farmers involved in the Carbery Greener Dairies Farm Programme met the criteria for an environmental diploma within UCC, which was really fantastic. So this meant that they could attend UCC to obtain the final credits and get a diploma from UCC. So that started in November 2018. So we had the first group graduate in November 2018 and the second in November 2019. So you can see that's the first group there receiving their diplomas, and this is the second group. And this year we have 16 farmers taking part in that diploma as well. So they'll be conferred at the end of this year, which is really fantastic. And I suppose it really shows that, you know, all of the efforts that farmers put in through discussion groups and any, I suppose, career development that they take part in, they might not realise it is career development, but when they get recognised through a diploma like this, it's just showcasing how much knowledge is among the farming community as well. And last slide for me, I suppose we were involved in the Carbery Tree project as well, and this is the first scheme of its kind in Ireland. So we gave every member 20 native Irish trees to plant, and I suppose this is used as a carbon offsetting measure and to increase biodiversity at farm level as well. And in 2018, some staff got involved as well, and some local schools also received some trees and planted them as well. So there was 45,000 trees planted across West Cork during the course of this project, and that was, I suppose, the equivalent of 850 million tonnes of carbon saved per year as well. So I'm going to hand you back to Enda, and he's going to continue the presentation.
Thanks, Aoife. So yeah, that's kind of the farm piece, and we'll bring it to the plant now, I guess. And look, this schematic, I think, is a kind of useful one to kind of show, I suppose, the circular economy at Carbery. So very briefly, I suppose, if we look at the top left-hand corner, milk comes into the plant. The cream goes to Kerrygold Park to make butter. So we start off with cheese production, and about 10% of the original milk volume goes to cheese production. After the cheese production, we're left with the whey. You then strip out the proteins through ultrafiltration, nanofiltration, etc. We make our whey protein isolates and whey protein concentrates. The resultant stream from that then is called whey permeate, and basically what's in the whey permeate is lactose and water and some minerals. And back again, back in 1978, 40 plus years ago, Carbery, the Carbery team at the time, they propagated yeast. They found the yeast strain that worked on the lactose, generated alcohol, and again, through distillation, we were able to produce significant volumes of bioethanol, which is unique in itself, but it doesn't stop there. The resultant stillage stream then goes to an anaerobic digester, and the first commercial AD in Ireland actually was in Carbery back in 1982. So it goes to AD, we then produce biogas, and that biogas, you can see there, it fulfills about 9% of the plant's steam requirements. And then the resultant stream from both the stillage and the biogas goes to a wastewater treatment plant we have near the plant in Carbery. That then develops a nutrient-rich fertilizer. It's actually classified as organic, and that's land spread locally on the farms. And off the cycle starts again. So it's a very circular process. It's quite unique, but it just gives you a flavour, I suppose, you know, again, come back to what we were saying earlier with innovation. But this is proper sustainability in action as well. Next slide. Thanks, Aoife. So look, just a kind of snapshot of some other innovations over the last decade or so. There was an energy monitoring system developed. We've installed, and again, the services team, you know, need the credit for this. Reverse osmosis plant was installed to initiate serious water savings. Heat utilization, so from the distillation, we generate a lot of heat. And again, that's then transferred to other parts of the plant to, you know, again, I suppose, offset kind of gas and electricity usage. and we also have a CHP plant as well that's there since the early 90s. ISO 50001 was attained as well during the last decade. That's an energy management standard, and we also installed Tempo, and a water condensate recovery plant was also installed in recent years. And that kind of brings us on to the next slide. So this is just an example of a project on the site. So this was the Every Drop Counts program. So again, reverse osmosis, the key technology at play here. So these plants were installed to concentrate the wave permeate streams and basically recover water from the process. So again, as part of that was, you know, massive tank storage installed to capture the final rinse from the CIP process from our cheese and ingredients plants. And again, just recovering water and being very, very smart with water usage. So this project, I was, you know, significant enough capex, 3 million. The initial payback was estimated to be 7.2 years. We think it'll be less than that now. Just on electrical savings alone, it's saving, you know, just shy of 370,000 euros a year. But the big one is the water saving. This project in its first phase is saving 1.4 million litres of water, you know, which is massive, especially in the context we use about 6 million litres. So it's huge, and we're down to phase 2, and we're hoping that will actually kind of save us in the region of over 2 million litres. So just an example, I suppose, of a good project on site. Next slide. Yeah, just our Board BA accreditation. So look, we obviously work very closely with Board BA, I suppose, just to state at the outset, and I know this is the case for most dairy suppliers in the country. Look, all our suppliers are SDAT certified. We have Origin Green membership, and I suppose we were very fortunate last year. We're one of 26 companies that actually got Origin Green Gold membership. And again, that's for kind of, I suppose, exceptional performance across the sustainability space. So we were delighted with that. And I suppose very recently, this is in the last few weeks, we've also attained grass-fed standards certification, which is a new standard launched by Board BA, and you know that's something we're quite happy with as well, I suppose. So next slide, just on recognition. So look, these are nice. Certainly won't be complacent, I suppose, but look, over the last kind of 4 or 5 years, we've won, I suppose, a series of awards in the sustainability space. Look, I'm not going to go through them all there. You can see what they are. I suppose last year was a good one for us. We, you know, the Green Food and Beverage Awards, we won the overall green food and beverage category. We won 3 awards in that as well. But like I said, these are nice, and look, they're nice to show customers, but you know, you certainly wouldn't be resting on your laurels either. Like, I suppose they're nice, but they're nice recognition to have. Next slide. Yeah, so I put this in because I was certainly we get kind of asked by people, you know, look, the sustainability stuff, you know, are people really pushing this agenda? And I think when you see this, you'll see they are. So we did a group materiality assessment over the last kind of 4 or 5 months. And that, I suppose, really, we did that, as I should say, as well, using the Sustainable Development Goals and the SASB framework to identify, I suppose, the most relevant, I suppose, issues in that environmental, social governance space. So it was very comprehensive. There was desk research, interviews. We spoke to regulators, spoke to global peers, customers relevant across the globe. So a very comprehensive assessment. And look, what it does is it helps to identify and rank, I suppose, the big priority issues for your company in that environmental, social, and governance space. And look, what it highlighted to us was, thankfully, we were on the right path, but certainly environmental issues are huge. Climate action, decarbonisation, that's a massive thing that certainly customers are demanding of us. Social issues as well, such as animal welfare, are very, very up on the priority list, and sustainable supply chain management. And that's just a snapshot, but it's just to give you a feel, I suppose, of what's out there and what we're hearing back from, you know, our peers, from our customers, regulators, etc., etc. And what it does, then it helps to inform our strategy, which, if you go to the next slide, please, Aoife. Yeah, so this again is just a snapshot, I suppose, of our strategy. So number one, look, the farm piece is critical to us. And again, for good reason, right? But even if you just look at the carbon element of it, you take a block of cheese, 90% of the embedded carbon comes from farm. So it's only right that we actually really focus on that space. So we're going to continue to develop on-farm initiatives, emphasising low carbon milk, health and welfare, and farm safety, as Aoife spoke about. Next one. We have an ambition to achieve carbon neutral status across all our sites. That's our manufacturing sites by 2035. Next one, Aoife, there is the water conservation is very important to us. So water conservation across the group. And the last one then is waste. We have a zero waste to landfill ambition across all our sites. So next slide, please. Yeah, I mentioned the bioeconomy, and this is something I suppose that we're very involved in. We're members of the Bio-Based Industries Consortium in Europe. We see this as a really happening space, but we've actually been part of it for a long time. So I mentioned the bioethanol plant. Look, that was pioneered back in 1978. It's called the Carbery process, later adopted in New Zealand and in Germany by Muller. So I suppose in recent times, we've actually been able to, so we got ISCCC certification, and that basically stipulates that our bioethanol it's a really sustainable biofuel. And I suppose you can see the numbers there. In an Irish context, it equates to avoided CO2 emissions of 16,321 tons compared to petrol, because all fuel and all petrol and diesel nowadays, they have a biofuel percentage in them. So in the case of petrol, it's bioethanol is what's added. So our plant currently produces about 12 million litres of bioethanol per annum. And I suppose when you compare the Carbery bioethanol versus petrol, it's 86% less carbon intensive than petrol. So this is just, I suppose, an example of us being active in the bioeconomy. Next slide, please. So another example, and I'd love to have more slides in this, guys, because this is a really, really great project that's just actually kind of finished. So there was a series of workshops last week where we presented it in tandem with the team. So this was led by James Gaffey and MTU in Tralee. So what you look at there is a grass biorefinery. And basically what the grass biorefinery does is it actually takes grass and converts them into 4 different co-products. So you can kind of see the flow diagram. The first product, so what it essentially is it's like a giant press. So you present grass to it, it goes through the press, and it spits out effectively fiber cake, which is that kind of grass substance you see there in the front of the screen. It's like lawn cuttings, and a green liquid juice, right? So the press cake, and this I should say as well, this machinery look at there was designed by Grassa, who were part of the biorefinery glass team, and it's a mobile unit. They call it fiber cake in Holland, but basically it's grass effectively, right? And you install that, and I suppose as part of this work, UCD Lines would have tested this press cake in tandem with silage, and it compared very favorably. The other element then is the green juice, and that basically has got 3 different co-products as part of that. So one is a protein concentrate. So for this project, that was concentrated and it was given to monogastrics, to pigs and poultry. And again, the trials were very positive. Another element is fructooligosaccharides, FOS, which is a prebiotic, and that goes into feed, particularly animal feeds. And the last part then is the grass whey, and that can either go as a biostimulant. And again, we did trials in that. I should say as well, this particular unit came to 5 farms in Carbery back in 2019, and those farms would have tested the grass whey as part of that as a biostimulant. And again, it basically compared very, very favorably with slurry. And the last part then is using the grass whey as a feedstock for anaerobic digestion. So if we just go to the next slide, please, Aoife. And again, I'm tearing through this, lads, but before I say any more, I would encourage people, if you're interested in this, go to the website, which is biorefineryglass.eu, because I'm not doing this justice because I haven't got the time, but it's a great project. And you can see as well, I should mention as well, I mentioned Grassa UCD were part of this, and Barry Rowe Co-op, who did the trials for us on the pigs. So really good project. The findings, I guess, look very encouraging, right? Definitely biorefining adds value to Irish grass and definitely provides diversification opportunities. I suppose all the 4 co-products, they compared very favorably with the incumbent streams, and there's definitely opportunities for emissions displacement. If you take the fiber cake, again, UCD did this work. They looked at it in terms of in vitro work using the Rusitech machine. How would it compare to silage? And the initial work that UCD did showed that it actually is generating 15% less methane emissions than silage. So that's very interesting in itself. Biorefining of grass can increase animal protein content production by up to 50% per hectare, which is very interesting. There's definitely scope to integrate biorefining and bioenergy with the AD. We see them as complementary. Can be delivered at small scale. And I suppose another big output from the project was farmers and primary producers can and should play a major role in the bioeconomy value chains. So that's biorefinery glass. I suppose another project that we're very involved in and leading is Farm Zero C. So this is about developing a climate neutral dairy farm at Shannock, which is owned by the West Cork Co-ops. We've made an application under SFI, Zero Emissions Challenge. So that's been led by Professor Kevin O'Connor and by Orbic. Teagasc are very involved through people like Lawrence, Trinity College, through Jane Stout and Cian, UCD, Fionnuala Murphy and Alejandro's or LCA, WizKid, MTU, James and Grasta again. So we've actually got a video. So before I say any more, I'm just going to just play the video there, please, Aoife.
Academia and others to create a dairy farm that produces net zero emissions, an economically viable climate neutral dairy farm.
So achieving net zero emissions for agriculture is incredibly important for Ireland. 33% of our emissions come from agriculture, but agriculture is also the powerhouse of the Irish economy. It is to the Irish economy what car manufacturing is to Germany. It provides so much jobs, it is critically important to the fabric of rural Ireland, so we need absolutely to support it. And if this industry can become carbon neutral, it has a future.
Shannock Dairy Farm is a 78-acre dairy farm owned by the 4 West Cork Co-ops, Drina, Barryraw, Lissavard and Bandon.
So I suppose what we'd love to achieve really is, number one, we can demonstrate a zero emissions dairy farm, because I think that'll be a real beacon for the industry. You know, if they can say we can do it here in Shannock, which is a very heavily stocked farm, you know, there's no reason why I can't do it on my farm.
At the global level, dairy is a major contributor to climate change. 5% of greenhouse gas emissions come from dairy systems. So in order to tackle climate change, we need to start looking into a system that reduces the emissions that come from this sector.
I think farmers are very interested in reducing emissions, improving biodiversity. They have been handed down the land from generations and they want to hand the land to the next generations.
So we're taking a very holistic approach. Farm Zero C is about looking at the farm as a whole. It's looking at the animal, looking at the multi-species swards.
This is a really interesting project because it brings a lot of the research that's been going on in academia into kind of industry and into practice. For example, we're standing in a field here which has got 6 species in it rather than the 1 or 2 species have in most fields. That kind of research into multi-species fields has been going on in ecology for maybe 30 years, but it's only now being seen as a technology that we can use to increase sustainability on farms.
To achieve a net zero emissions dairy farm, we are bringing together diverse strategies. We are trialling feed additives to cows' diets to reduce methane emissions, mapping existing biodiversity while increasing area and quality of natural habitats, analysing the soil to maximise carbon sequestration potential and minimise soil emissions, planting multi-species swards to reduce fertiliser and ammonia inputs, monitoring the quality of energy use on farm and generating more renewable energy, including sustainability in the economics of a typical Irish family dairy farm, quantifying the total inputs and outputs of the farm to measure both the emissions and carbon sinks associated with milk production. Implementing Farm Zero C nationally could effectively halve Ireland's dairy emissions.
I want to see Shannock going net zero, but I want to see Shannock making more money, keeping productive, having a better quality milk. Shannock at the end of the day serves as a demonstrator for farms all over the world so that it can be seen that this can be achieved. Like, we can tackle food security while at the same time tackling environmental sustainability.
This research is really pointing us towards the fact that this is possible. So that's really, for me, the very exciting part.
We would love to win the SFI Zero Emissions Challenge. Obviously, the prize at the end of that would make a massive difference to the farm. If we could obtain that funding, we can go on to better things, really, and I suppose show consumers and farmers alike that this thing is doable and there's a bright future for dairy farming.
We've also made a proposal to the EU Farm to Fork. Again, most of the partners I mentioned are in that, plus some new guys like Valio Caps, carbon harvesters. And just the last slide, look, we envisage 3 phases to achieving net zero emissions. The plan is to get there by 2027. As was really, we see this as converting the problem into solution. Farmers just need the toolkit to decarbonize. I think farmers are very adaptive and flexible, so it's about us providing the tools. And look, we hope the project will be a beacon, I suppose, for sustainable ag in Ireland and globally. And yeah, that's effectively it, Mark.
That's great, Enda and Aoife, thank you. And sorry for putting you under pressure there at the end, but I think we'd like to try and leave some space for questions from our audience. So really impressive work going on. You're obviously putting a lot of resources into sustainability throughout Carbery, and a lot of innovation there. Obviously, you're a lot of projects going on and collaborations. Just from I suppose, looking forward over the next number of years, what would you see as the main challenges facing not just processing, but I suppose the supply side as well? Obviously, you're putting a lot of effort into mitigating against the climate side of things, but we know that there are issues facing Ireland, in terms of water quality. Obviously the asset programme is there to try and address that. But a question that comes to us on a regular basis here is, the future trends in terms of cow numbers or average stocking rates on farms and so forth. I mean, the trends have been heading since the quota abolition, have been heading towards increased cow numbers at a farm level. But from a Carbery perspective, where do you see that headed?
Yeah, so I suppose I'd say a few things, Mark. I suppose first of all, I think that's why the Farm Zero C project is so important. I mean, Shannock is actually a relatively heavily stocked farm, I suppose, and look, our ambition there is, it was initially to be carbon neutral, but it's now very much climate neutral. And obviously, to be climate neutral, we absolutely have to be best in class when it comes to water quality, biodiversity, etc. So I think that'll be a really good test bed for us, Mark. And I suppose, look, that I think we got to find that sweet spot. I suppose the second point I'd make is, there has been, I think everyone that's in the industry knows, there's been, significant, I suppose, expansion since quotas were abolished, but we certainly see that plateauing. I think it is, that it's kind of reached the saturation point. The forecast this year is, I think, 2 to 3% increase in milk volumes. So, I think that needs to be mentioned as well. Yeah, and look, I might defer to Aoife here. Like, the asset program obviously is going to be critical. Water quality is very, very important. We have to get it right, and that's as I see, that's a very important program to be delivered. And do you want to come in there, Aoife, on that maybe?
Yeah, I suppose, we're really trying to push ASAP, and we actually have quite a few areas for action, given that I suppose it's such an important program for us. But we're just encouraging farmers to get involved, even if they're outside of the areas for action at the moment, because we see it as such a critical aspect to our business. It's critical to the nitrates derogation, which is very important in West Cork and many parts of the country as well. We're not the only processor affected by it. And I suppose the key thing with ASAP is it's a fantastic program. It is showing excellent results, but the sooner we get involved with it, the better, because it's a slow progress, given that there are only 30 advisors to do on-farm assessment. And I suppose, it is proven that one-to-one advisory is a fantastic mechanism for creating behaviour change and the uptake of innovation and technology at ground level. But it is a slow progress, so we really have to keep on top of it and keep making sure that we're getting out at farm now. Obviously, COVID has had quite an implication for all of the advisors across the country. And we have Water Quality Week coming up, and I know you're going to speak on that, Mark, but we really encourage anyone that's interested to start looking at the information that's coming out of that. Get in touch with your local advisors and just really start to look at the information on water quality and see what you can do at farm level to get involved.
Okay, thanks Aoife. Pat, we've got some nice questions coming in from our audience.
Yeah, some really good questions. One there is just saying great progress, a lot of emphasis on carbon, but what are specific issues, or what specific actions are you taking in relation to nitrates loss, particularly in a lot of the free draining soils that you're working within?
Yeah, so I suppose ASIP really is the key action. We're working with our farmer suppliers quite closely. We're promoting protected urea through the relevant co-ops as well. And I suppose it's really that advisory piece, trying to, I suppose, give knowledge out to the farmers and information on how they can reduce. It's all about source control when it comes to nitrogen. We have quite free draining soils in West Cork. So it's really trying to make them aware of what the issues are and what they can do to reduce that at farm level, and improving nitrogen use efficiency will be really important with this as well.
And there's a question there in relation to the, I suppose, the economic value of say, the SDAS and other initiatives to the farmers on the ground. And I suppose to date, and do you see it being an important contributor to, I suppose, increased milk price or increased margin for those farmers going forward, this whole movement into sustainability?
Yeah, so I suppose like where it's kind of gone now really is, it's a case of, you know, if we don't demonstrate our sustainability credentials, we're going to lose market ground, and a lot of it, because it's now at a case where it's expected and demanded. So I know maybe in earlier days it was kind of seen as maybe potential for premium, but it's now absolutely kind of, it's an absolute, you have no choice. But that being said, and I think that the grass-fed piece is interesting. You know, hopefully that will, you know, get us into new markets. And obviously when that happens, Pat, you know, you're always hoping that there'll be some extra revenue there. And so the dial is probably moved a bit, Pat, I would say. You know, it's gone from a case of, yeah, a nice thing to have, whereas now it's expected and demanded, really.
A question there in relation to the biorefinery. Given the business you're in, do you see any prospect for the products of the grass biorefinery coming into the human food stream?
Yeah, so we had the workshops last week, and that question was asked, and it was so Johan Sanders, who's the main guy in grass, was saying yes is the answer, Pat. That's certainly when it comes to things like the FOS, the fructooligosaccharides, there's definitely potential there. Yes is the answer. Yeah.
Okay, changing topic of me. The diploma in environment science, there's a question there about the amount of classroom versus kind of on-farm learning that was there, and the kind of credit that was given for the on-farm learning piece as opposed to a classroom piece in farmers being recognized for their achievements in relation to that program.
Yeah, Enda, you were probably a bit more involved in the making of this program, so I might let you take that one.
Yeah, so I suppose if we go back to the very start of it, Pat, really, I suppose, so RPL, retrospective prior learning, was a relatively new, I suppose, piece come back a number of years ago. So it really, to your question, it recognized what the farmers did, I suppose, as part of what they did through the Greener Dairy program, but also as things like Aoife mentioned, you know, workshops, farm walks, training courses. But predominantly, to your question, Pat, it would be, I would call, outside learning. You know, it wasn't what they did in the classroom. So it recognized that learning that was done, you know, outside learning, we call it. And then I suppose the farmers had to, essentially, the way that broke down, Pat, was approximately 6/10 of the diploma was recognized as stuff that the farmers had done previously, and the remaining 40% then they had to go to college and finish in a classroom setting.
Okay, there's a question there in relation to I suppose, the broadening of the scope of sustainability over the last number of years, in that there seems to be more and more elements coming into the sustainability question, and the journey for farmers in terms of I suppose, getting to grip with all of the elements of sustainability now. How are you finding farmers taking that on board? Is it a huge challenge, or is it something that you just need to keep feeding them, or do you have to kind of nudge them along?
Yeah, it's a very good question, I suppose. And the first point I'd make here is, I think maybe farmers don't realize it, but they're innately, I think, very sustainable operators, and they're very quite. I think nowadays certainly they're very scientific in their approach. So I think most of them are embracing it. like I said, I think the language here as well, lads, we need to be careful because you know, there's a lot of I would call fancy terms and fancy terminology which just alienates people. We got to bring this down to, you know, what I would call simple language. Keep it simple. A lot of it is common sense. And I think when we do it that way, Pat, we've a chance because, like I said, guys are doing this innately anyway. Look, certainly from our perspective in the co-ops, we'll be trying to make it as easy as we can for them. But you know, I put up that slide on the materiality assessment, Pat. Like I said, this has been demanded of us. We'll have to deliver the goods in terms of especially climate action and the environment and those other pieces as well if we're going to remain top of the class in terms of food production.
And could I ask you a question in relation to labeling and communicating those environmental credentials to the consumer? You know, what's your view on that, or what's the direction of travel on that? Because there have been talks of, you know, carbon footprinting appearing on food labels, but we know that obviously sustainability is much broader than just the carbon element.
Yeah, no, good one, Mark. And I suppose, so what I would say on that is, as part of the Farm Zero C work, we actually did a market insights report with KPMG and Borbia. And I suppose the first thing is certainly it's coming, Mark. You know, when you talk to people about the carbon trust, etc., you know, they would say perhaps, but yes, carbon footprinting is coming per product. I think that was mooted probably 5 years ago, but I think there's certainly a lot more talk around it in the last year or so. And I suppose the second point here is, I'm sure this farm is listening in, like I suppose there also needs to be an element here of, well as we're going to do all these things, the consumer probably needs to, you know, pay a bit more as well. And that market insights work indicates that they will be willing to, which I hope will transpire. But yes, I think that's coming, Mark. Certainly carbon footprinting of products is coming, and we'll see that on labels, I would think.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, because I mean, there was a question there in relation to, you know, that translation of that price from, you know, wholesalers or, you know, milk markets, you know, particularly there was a question there, if I can just find it, around markets over in the likes of Asia. Are they prepared to pay for that more or milk that's produced, or products that are produced under higher environmental standards?
Yeah, and I suppose, like I said, I point to that bit of research that was done for us, Mark. They're saying they will. No, not massive premiums, but I think we'll obviously take anything we can get. But they're saying they will, Mark. It was the feedback from that report.
Question there in relation to the potential role for animal breeding, for cow breeding, in terms of the achievement of I suppose more sustainable output.
Yeah, I suppose what I would say there is, and look, in fairness, Teagasc are leading the way. This, guys, I think if you look at the MAC curve, I suppose, you know, certainly when you look at EBI and the impact that has in the MAC curve, it's significant. I think it's the second biggest measure after protected urea, isn't it? So. Yeah. That would be my answer to that, Pat. I think certainly, definitely, EBI is a big part of this, and we should be all promoting. I think the use of higher EBI breeds.
Quite a specific question then. Does Carbery have much rejected milk from antibiotic residues, and how do they treat and dispose of such milk in a circular economy?
Okay, so the answer is no, thankfully, and I know from that we obviously track it. And it was certainly even less again last year, and it's processed through AD. That is the answer.
Okay.
Good.
Sorry, go on ahead, Mark.
Yeah, a question here in relation to food miles. Do you see that being a problem for our exports, given the fact that most of our product is exported? Do you see that being an issue for you know, affecting the carbon footprint, or indeed just for buyers out there?
Yeah, I guess it's certainly going to come on the agenda. I suppose the first thing I'd say is I think there's a growing European market for us. I know we look at Asia a lot, so I think there's certainly more scope to grow that. Again, I suppose you've got to look at this in a holistic kind of fashion as well, I suppose I would say, because certainly we know we can grow our produce here with a lot lower footprint than, say, other countries that have a lot higher footprint. So I think you got to look at it holistically, Mark, and you got to do basically a full life cycle analysis. And even though it might, yes, there is the food might aspect, I guess, but the transport leg typically is not actually that carbon intensive when you look at the whole cycle. So I suppose my point on that is I think we need to look at it from a whole holistic perspective.
There's an argument there. There's a question here relating to with all of our environmental credentials and our grass-based systems, why have we one of the lowest milk prices in the world? And I suppose it adds to add on to that. I mean, are there any ambitions there to kind of to try and enter more premium markets for product coming from Ireland, or to tie into that original question?
Yeah, I think definitely, certainly, it's always on the Carbery radar, and I think I'm sure it's the same for the other processors, Mark. You're always looking for that value add, and where can we attain more premium and more value for your farmer suppliers. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we're just out of time, I'm afraid. Unless, Pat, you have any burning questions that you'd like to...
Oh, I don't think so. I think most of them have been answered.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, Aoife and Enda, thank you so much for your time and effort in your presentation. Obviously, a lot of hard work going on in Carbery to try and drive down the environmental footprint of the sector. So congratulations on all of the work that you're doing there. Just to remind everybody that if you want to receive updates on training opportunities and latest publications, you can sign up to Teagasc Connected Digital now on the Teagasc website. So finally, I want to thank our production team, in particular Andy Boland, Pat Murphy and Yvonne Maher. Next week, I'll be talking to John Keogh from Animal Plant Association and Health Association, and we'll be talking about low impact weed control and protecting drinking water sources through that. And also, I've just been asked to plug a series of events that are going to be taking place as part of Water Quality Week, which begins the 22nd of March, Monday the 22nd of March, and right through to Friday the 26th of March. And they'll be dealing with different themes on different days: water quality and catchment management, breaking the pathway of phosphorus and sediment loss, and managing your farmyard, and Signpost webinar. So there's lots more details available on that on the Teagasc Farming for Water Quality section on the Teagasc website. So from all of the team, I want to say take care and stay safe, and we hope you enjoy the weekend, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Mark.